My name is Summerlin, and the moment my 5-year relationship truly ended happened inside a quiet therapy office. There was no screaming, no shattered glass, no dramatic confession of infidelity. My boyfriend simply looked at a licensed therapist and explained that he was trying to determine whether I was worth keeping. The leather armchair felt cold beneath my palms. I focused on that sensation, the faint, clean smell of the room, and the diplomas hanging behind Dr. Evans's desk. Anywhere except Mason. He sat 3 feet away in a matching chair, scrolling through his phone as though we were waiting for a delayed flight rather than attempting to save our relationship. Couples therapy had been my idea. For 6 months, Mason and I had lived like polite roommates. Our conversations were logistical briefings about bills, groceries, and schedules. Affection felt automatic, a duty performed because 5 years together had made it expected. I missed the man who once stayed awake talking with me until sunrise. I still believed we could find our way back. When I suggested counseling, Mason shrugged. If you think it'll help. Even then, his tone suggested he was indulging me. Dr. Evans entered with a notebook and a calm smile. Thank you both for coming. This is a space for honesty without judgment. She turned toward me. Summerlin, you suggested therapy. What are you hoping to accomplish? I took a steady breath. I want to understand what happened to us. We feel disconnected, like roommates who share a bed. I want to hear what Mason needs and figure out how we rebuild the relationship. The words made me feel exposed. I looked toward Mason. He was examining one of his fingernails. Dr. Evans nodded. Thank you for being vulnerable. Mason, what are your hopes for these sessions? He sighed as though she had asked him to complete paperwork. I just need help deciding something. Deciding what? Mason finally looked at me. There was no sadness in his expression. Only assessment. I'm here to figure out whether she's worth keeping or whether I should cut my losses and find someone better. The room became completely still. Worth keeping. Cut my losses. Someone better. A memory surfaced before I could stop it. 2 years earlier, Mason's laptop crashed the night before a major presentation. The file was corrupted, and he sat on the floor panicking while I made him tea and wrapped a blanket around his shoulders. I worked until 4 in the morning recovering fragments of data and rebuilding every slide from his notes. When I finished, Mason hugged me. You're my hero. He slept peacefully while I went to work on 2 hours of rest. At the time, I felt loved. Now I understood that he had not seen a partner. He had seen a useful tool. Dr. Evans's eyes widened slightly. That is a very final way of framing the purpose of therapy. Mason shrugged. I'm being realistic. Time is passing. I need to know whether this relationship is the best I can do. He gestured loosely between us. 5 years of birthdays, sacrifices, shared bills, and private promises became a vague movement of his hand. For months, I had asked myself what I was doing wrong. In one sentence, Mason gave me clarity. He was not there to rebuild. He was there to evaluate whether I deserved to remain in his life. I placed both hands on the chair and stood. Mason's expression changed. He had expected tears. Maybe bargaining. Maybe a speech proving why I was valuable. I gave him none. Thank you for your time, Dr. Evans. She watched me with cautious sympathy. I believe Mason has clarified the purpose of these sessions. I turned toward him. I'm not interested in being audited. Summerlin, sit down. I met his eyes. Good question. I hope you find your answer. Then I walked out. The door closed softly behind me. No slam. Only the quiet click of a latch. Outside, I sat in my car with my hands resting on the steering wheel. The numbness slowly transformed into relief. It had been over for months. Mason had simply announced the verdict aloud. I drove to my best friend Alicia's apartment. She opened the door holding a sandwich. Aren't you supposed to be in therapy? It's over. Her face changed immediately. What happened? He said he was deciding whether I was worth keeping or if he should find someone better. Alicia stared at me. He said that in front of the therapist? Yes. What did you do? I left. My phone showed 3 missed calls from Mason. I sent one message. I've left. Your belongings are untouched. I will not be returning. All communication regarding the house and finances can go through email. Then I blocked him. I returned to our house while he was still gone and packed one duffel bag. Clothes, passport, laptop, financial documents. The small fireproof box from the closet. I left the photographs, furniture, and memories behind. On the kitchen counter, I placed my key beside the fruit bowl. No letter. My absence was enough. I closed the door and walked away from the life Mason was still deciding whether to keep. I had already made my decision. The first night on Alicia's couch should have been miserable. The cushions sagged in the middle, her upstairs neighbor played music until almost midnight, and I had only packed enough clothes for a week. Still, I slept more deeply than I had in months. There was no tension beside me. No cold silence from Mason. No invisible scorecard measuring whether I was interesting enough, ambitious enough, or useful enough to keep. The next morning, Alicia placed coffee in front of me. You're really not going back? No. You don't want to hear his explanation? He already explained. She watched me carefully. You seem calm. I feel empty. That's different. She was right. The grief had not arrived yet. Everything still felt administrative, like the relationship had become a complicated project that needed to be closed properly. I contacted a realtor that afternoon. The house was jointly owned, so selling it required Mason's cooperation. I sent the paperwork through email, along with a short message explaining that all communication would remain limited to property and finances. His first response arrived within minutes. You're seriously selling the house because of one sentence? I did not answer. Another email followed. You misunderstood me. Then another. Dr. Evans said we should communicate. I forwarded everything to my attorney. By Thursday, the house was listed. By Monday, we had 3 competitive offers. The market was strong, and the repairs I had insisted on over the years, the roof, landscaping, plumbing, and electrical work, had increased the value significantly. Mason once complained that I worried too much about maintenance. Now my boring attention to detail was protecting both of us financially. I rented a small apartment downtown. It had white walls, a narrow balcony, and a view of office buildings with a thin strip of sky between them. I bought a bed, a desk, a chair, and almost nothing else. The emptiness felt luxurious. For the first time, every object in my home existed because I chose it. I returned to the gym, not to punish my body or outrun sadness, but to recover a rhythm that belonged to me. Running was honest. Lifting was honest. The weight never pretended to love me. It simply waited for me to become strong enough to carry it. I also reconnected with people I had gradually stopped seeing during the relationship. When friends asked what happened, I kept the explanation simple. Mason decided the relationship wasn't working. I agreed. I never insulted him. I never mentioned the therapy room sentence unless someone directly asked. Apparently, Mason had no such restraint. A mutual friend named Rachel asked me to meet for coffee 2 weeks after the breakup. She sat across from me with an uneasy expression. Mason is telling people you had some kind of breakdown during therapy. I stirred my coffee. What kind of breakdown? He says you refused to participate, walked out, disappeared from the house, and blocked him to punish him. That's interesting. Rachel leaned closer. What actually happened? He told Dr. Evans he was there to decide whether I was worth keeping or if he should find someone better. Her hand froze around her cup. He said that? Yes. In front of you? And the therapist. Rachel stared at me for several seconds. Summerlin, that's horrible. It was clarifying. She sat back. So you just left? Yes. A strange admiration appeared in her eyes. I don't think he expected you to. He expected me to defend my value. And you didn't. I shouldn't have to audition for my own relationship. Rachel nodded slowly. Then she hesitated. He's already seeing someone. The news landed without impact. Her name is Vanessa, Rachel continued. She works in business development. Apparently, she drives an Audi and knows everyone in the city. Good for him. Rachel studied me. You really don't care. I hope he finds what he was looking for. But what Mason found was mostly performance. Reports came through mutual friends without me asking. Vanessa dominated conversations, ordered for him at restaurants, and constantly corrected the way he dressed and spoke. She posted photographs of luxury dinners, rooftop bars, and expensive weekends. Mason smiled in every picture. The smile never reached his eyes. A few weeks later, another friend texted me. Vanessa screamed at a waiter because the wine was corked. It wasn't. Mason looked humiliated. I replied, "Thanks for telling me." That was all. The house sale closed. My attorney handled the financial split. The money appeared in my account, and the final physical tether disappeared. My apartment slowly began feeling less like temporary shelter. I bought shelves and filled them with books I had postponed reading. I purchased a small sound system and rediscovered jazz albums Mason always called depressing. I enrolled in a professional certification program I had avoided because studying would have interfered with our evenings together. The silence gave me space. At work, my concentration sharpened. Projects that once took days became easier because I was no longer spending half my energy anticipating Mason's dissatisfaction. Then, one evening, while I was chopping vegetables for dinner, my phone displayed a voicemail from an unknown number. I pressed play. Mason's voice filled the kitchen. "Summerlin, it's me. Please call me back. Vanessa isn't who I thought she was. I'm in a bad situation." I continued cutting the carrots. "She's controlling. Things are falling apart. I just need to talk to someone who understands me." The knife struck the board in a steady rhythm. Thump, thump, thump. Then he said the sentence I expected. "You were my home." I finished the carrot and placed the pieces into a bowl. Mason did not miss me. He missed the fixer, the dependable woman who solved problems while he decided whether she was good enough. I saved the voicemail in a folder labeled Utilities. Then I sat down and ate dinner in peace. The voicemail changed nothing. Mason's voice had sounded strained, even frightened, but fear was not the same as remorse. He had not called to admit how cruelly he reduced our relationship to an evaluation. He had called because Vanessa had become difficult, and he wanted the woman who used to make difficult things disappear. I continued studying for my certification. A month later, I passed in the 95th percentile. My manager called me into his office the following morning. "The Edwards account was flawless," he said. "We're creating a senior strategy role. It's yours if you want it." I accepted without hesitation. The promotion came with a substantial raise and responsibilities I had once assumed I was not ready to handle. Mason had spent years making me feel as though my steadiness were ordinary. Without his constant assessment, I discovered it was one of my greatest strengths. Meanwhile, reports about Vanessa became increasingly bleak. Rachel met me for drinks one evening and lowered her voice as though sharing classified information. "Vanessa is not really in business development." "What does she do?" "She sells supplements through something that looks suspiciously like a pyramid scheme." I took a sip of sparkling water. Rachel continued. "She convinced Mason to invest $5,000. He withdrew it from his savings." "And the Audi?" "Repossession. 3 missed lease payments." I nodded. The flash had always been borrowed. "She criticizes him constantly," Rachel added. "His clothes, his friends, even how he speaks. He looks exhausted." "That's unfortunate." Rachel stared at me. "That's all?" "What else should I say?" "She's destroying him." "No. He chose a relationship built on appearances because he believed appearances were better than what we had." Rachel sighed. "You're really done." "Yes." A second message arrived from another unknown number several days later. "Summerlin, I know you're receiving these. I made a terrible mistake. Vanessa is controlling, the money is gone, and I finally understand what we had. You were my home. Please call me. We can fix this." I read the message once. The language was revealing. He described our relationship in the past tense but demanded that I rescue him in the present. He did not miss my laugh, my thoughts, or the person I had become. He missed safety. I deleted the message. Silence gave him nothing to argue with. No sentence to twist. No guilt to exploit. His apologies gradually turned into anger. One Tuesday night, a voicemail arrived. Fine, ignore me. But you owe me closure. You cannot walk away from 5 years without one real conversation. Stop being childish and call me. I played it for Alicia. She laughed without humor. He told a therapist he was deciding whether you were worth keeping. What could be more final than that? Exactly. Mason did not want closure. He wanted another opportunity to negotiate. Then Vanessa's business appeared in the local news. State investigators had raided the supplement company over false medical claims, fraudulent recruitment practices, and missing investor funds. A photograph in the article showed Vanessa smiling beside towers of protein powder. Several top sellers were facing lawsuits. Mason's investment was gone. His imagined upgrade had turned into public humiliation. My own life moved in the opposite direction. The apartment was no longer empty. I added a comfortable reading chair, framed prints, shelves, and a proper dining table. I filled the space only with things I genuinely enjoyed. The peace was no longer merely the absence of Mason. It had become something alive. I also met Adrian through a project involving an architecture firm. He was thoughtful, intelligent, and never treated conversation like a competition. We began with coffee, then dinner, then quiet weekends exploring bookstores and unfamiliar neighborhoods. Adrian listened, not while checking his phone, not while waiting for his turn to speak. He asked questions because the answers mattered to him. One Saturday morning, I went to my usual coffee shop with a book about maritime history. The sunlight through the front windows warmed the wooden table. I had just underlined a paragraph when I felt someone watching me. Mason stood near the entrance. He looked thinner. The expensive clothes he once wore with Vanessa had been replaced by an old jacket. His face seemed drawn, and the confident judgment from the therapy office had disappeared. He walked toward me. Summerlin. I closed the book, keeping one finger between the pages. Mason. He flinched at the neutrality in my voice. You're difficult to reach. I've been busy. He sat down without being invited. I need to talk about us. There is no us. You just left. You never let me explain. You explained yourself clearly in front of a professional witness. His face reddened. I was wrong. I waited. Vanessa was a disaster, he said. The company was a scam. She used my money. She treated me terribly. That has nothing to do with me. It does because I understand now. He leaned forward. What we had was real. 5 years should mean something. It did. Hope appeared in his eyes. It meant enough that I tried to save it. You used therapy to decide whether I was the best you could do. I was scared of settling. And now you're scared of being alone. He stared at me. I miss you. You miss what I did for you. That isn't true. Would you be here if Vanessa's life had worked out? His mouth opened. No answer came. I gathered my phone, wallet, and keys. Mason's expression became frantic. Please, Summerlin. We owe it to ourselves to try again. I stood. You told Dr. Evans you needed to figure out whether I was worth keeping. His face went pale. It took me about 10 seconds after you said that to decide you weren't. He recoiled. You're still figuring things out, Mason. I gave him the same small nod I had given him in the therapy office. I already did. Then I walked away. An hour later, my phone filled with messages from another number. Apologies became accusations. Heartless. Cold. You were never enough. I deleted the thread and changed my settings to ignore calls from unknown numbers. 1 week later, Adrian and I had dinner at a small Italian restaurant. Over dessert, he asked what I had done that morning. I finished a book, I said, and closed another one. He smiled. That sounds like peace. It is. Later, when he kissed me goodnight, my phone vibrated once inside my bag. I did not check it. The past had become irrelevant. Not painful, not comforting, just information from a story that was finished. My life was beginning again. And Mason was no longer part of it. After the coffee shop, Mason disappeared again. For several weeks, there were no unknown calls, no emails sent to my work address, and no messages passed through mutual friends. The silence felt different from the quiet after therapy. That first silence had been an empty room. This one felt like a locked door. Adrian and I continued seeing each other without rushing. He never asked me to define the relationship before I was ready. He did not treat my caution like an insult or demand that I prove I trusted him. He simply remained consistent. One evening, we cooked dinner at my apartment. Adrian chopped vegetables while I stood near the stove, and jazz played softly from the sound system. He looked around the room. "This place feels like you." I smiled. It was almost empty when I moved in. "What changed?" I stopped thinking of it as temporary. He nodded as though the answer mattered. With Mason, every conversation had eventually become an evaluation. Was the apartment impressive enough? Was my job ambitious enough? Was our relationship exciting enough? Adrian never made life feel like an exam. At work, the senior role demanded more of me, but I welcomed it. I led meetings, trained new employees, and handled clients who once would have intimidated me. My manager began discussing a possible partnership track. For years, I had believed I lacked some undefined quality that made Mason restless. Now I understood that his dissatisfaction had never been an accurate measurement of me. It was only evidence of his inability to appreciate stability without mistaking it for stagnation. Rachel contacted me one afternoon. "Mason has moved back in with his parents," she said. "I hope he gets back on his feet." "That's all? What else would there be?" She hesitated. "Vanessa is facing multiple lawsuits. Mason might be questioned because his name appeared on some promotional documents." I felt no satisfaction. Mason had wanted someone who appeared bold, connected, and exciting. He had accepted the image without examining the foundation beneath it. Now, the entire structure was collapsing. "That sounds difficult," I said. Rachel sighed. "You really don't hate him?" "No." "Why not?" Hate would keep him important. That answer surprised even me. The relationship had once occupied nearly every corner of my emotional life. Now Mason felt like someone I had known long ago, a character whose decisions once shaped the story, but no longer controlled its direction. Still, the past made one final attempt to reach me. A letter arrived at my office, not an email, a handwritten letter. My name was written across the envelope in Mason's familiar handwriting. I considered throwing it away. Instead, I opened it in the privacy of my apartment that evening. The letter was 4 pages long. Mason wrote that he had begun therapy on his own. He said Dr. Evans had refused to discuss our session but encouraged him to examine why he treated relationships like competitions. He admitted that Vanessa had initially attracted him because she appeared to possess everything he believed was missing from our life: status, risk, confidence, and unpredictability. Then he wrote, "I thought peace meant I had settled. I did not understand that peace was something we had built." For the first time, the apology focused less on what he had lost and more on what he had done. He acknowledged the years I spent helping him, the presentation I rebuilt, the problems I solved, and the ways he accepted my support, while privately judging whether I deserved him. The final paragraph was simple. "I am not asking you to return. I know I destroyed that possibility. I only want you to know that you were never lacking. I was searching for a better life because I lacked the maturity to recognize the one I already had." I read the letter twice, then I placed it inside a drawer. I did not answer. An apology could be sincere without creating a new obligation. Understanding his mistake did not make him entitled to my forgiveness, my attention, or another place in my life. A few days later, Adrian and I attended an architectural awards dinner connected to one of our joint projects. He wore a dark suit and looked uncomfortable beneath the formal collar. "You clean up well," I told him. "I feel like a waiter at an expensive restaurant." I laughed. During dinner, Adrian introduced me to colleagues as his partner, not his girlfriend in a possessive way, not the woman who helped him, his partner. The word stayed with me. Later, we stood on a terrace overlooking the city. Adrian leaned against the railing. I want to ask you something. My body tensed automatically. He noticed. This is not a proposal. I exhaled, embarrassed. He smiled gently. I want to know whether you see a future with me. The question should have frightened me. Instead, it felt honest. Yes, I said. Relief softened his expression. I do too. He did not ask for promises beyond that. We remained on the terrace, watching the lights below us. I thought about the therapy room and the way Mason had looked at me as though my worth required proof. Adrian had asked whether I saw a future. Mason had asked whether I was worth one. That difference was everything. Several months later, I received an invitation to a mutual friend's wedding. Mason's name appeared on the guest list. For a moment, I considered declining. Then I looked around the life I had created. My work was thriving. My home felt warm. Adrian stood in my kitchen arguing with the rescue cat we had recently adopted because it had stolen a piece of chicken from his plate. I was no longer afraid of seeing Mason. He had no power left to take. The wedding would become the final place where our old life and my new one crossed. And this time, I would not be the woman standing up to escape an evaluation. I would be the woman walking in beside someone who had never asked her to audition. The wedding took place at a renovated vineyard outside the city. Adrian and I arrived shortly before sunset. Rows of white chairs faced a wooden arch covered in pale flowers, and warm lights had been strung between the trees. He adjusted his tie while we walked toward the reception area. You're quiet, he said. I'm thinking. About Mason? A little. Adrian nodded without jealousy or suspicion. Do you want to leave? No. That answer felt important. For years, I had avoided discomfort by shrinking myself or managing someone else's reaction. Now, I could enter a room containing my past without allowing it to control the evening. We found our table near the dance floor. Mason arrived alone 20 minutes later. I noticed him only because the conversation around us briefly changed. Mutual friends straightened, lowered their voices, and watched him enter with the careful curiosity people reserve for someone connected to an old scandal. He looked healthier, not polished or performative, simply quieter. When his eyes found mine, he stopped. Then he noticed Adrian beside me. For a moment, I saw the memory of that therapy room pass across his face, the same old instinct to compare, measure, and decide who had won. But it disappeared quickly. He gave me a small nod. I returned it. That was all. During dinner, Mason remained at a table across the room. He spoke with friends, laughed occasionally, and never attempted to interrupt my evening. Part of me had expected another confrontation, a dramatic apology, a final demand for closure. Instead, the restraint told me more than the letter had. Perhaps he had finally learned that remorse did not grant access. After the meal, the newly married couple invited everyone onto the dance floor. Adrian stood and offered me his hand. I should warn you, he said. I only know 3 dance moves, and 2 are almost identical. I've survived worse. We joined the crowd. Adrian was right about his dancing, but he laughed whenever he stepped on my shoe and never once blamed me for moving incorrectly. Halfway through the song, I glanced toward the edge of the floor. Mason stood near the bar. He was watching us. There was sadness in his expression, but no entitlement. When our eyes met, he lifted his glass slightly. Not a toast, an acknowledgement. Then he turned away. Later, while Adrian spoke with the groom, Mason approached me near the terrace. Summerlin. Mason. He kept a respectful distance. I won't take much of your time. I waited. I wanted to thank you for reading the letter. I didn't tell you I read it. You're here. You don't look angry. I assumed. I did read it. He nodded. I meant what I wrote. I believe you. His eyes briefly closed. The forgiveness he seemed to hear in those words was not what I had offered, but I did not correct him immediately. Then I said, believing you does not change my decision. I know. The answer came without resistance. I spent a long time thinking you left because you were cold, he continued. Then I realized you left because I had made staying humiliating. The honesty surprised me. Yes. He looked toward Adrian. He seems good for you. He is. I'm glad. There was pain in his voice, but it belonged to him now. Mason reached into his jacket pocket and removed the key to our former house. The property had been sold months earlier, making the key useless. I found this while moving, he said. I kept thinking it meant something. It used to. He looked at the small piece of metal in his palm. What should I do with it? Throw it away. For a second, he almost smiled. Then he walked to a nearby trash bin and dropped the key inside. The sound was barely audible beneath the music. Still, it felt final. When he returned, I said, I hope therapy helps you build something healthier next time. I hope so too. He hesitated. Are you happy? I looked through the open doors. Adrian stood inside holding 2 pieces of wedding cake, examining them as if choosing the better one required serious analysis. Yes. Mason followed my gaze. I can see that. He said goodbye and returned to his table. There was no dramatic collapse, no public humiliation, no victory. Only 2 people finally accepting that the relationship was over. Adrian joined me on the terrace and handed me the larger slice of cake. I compared them carefully, he said. This one has more frosting. You remembered I like the frosting. Of course. The gesture was small. That was why it mattered. On the drive home, my phone remained silent. No unknown numbers. No desperate messages. No final attempt from Mason to reopen the conversation. I rested my head against the window while Adrian drove. The city lights passed in quiet streaks. For years, I believed healing would require an explanation powerful enough to erase what happened. It did not. Healing came from leaving when my humanity became negotiable. It came from building a home where silence felt peaceful rather than punishing. It came from loving someone who asked what future we could create together instead of deciding whether I qualified for one. My name is Summerlin. Mason entered therapy to determine whether I was worth keeping. His answer destroyed our relationship. Mine rebuilt my life.